What's up, guys? This is Coach Grant with First Down Training, and today we're going to be breaking down 5 different wide receiver press releases, the name of each release, when to use each release, and then the technique behind it. So I hope this video helps you guys out. Hope it can teach you a few new things about how to beat press. But also, fellas, if you're a wide receiver and you would like to train with myself and my staff of coaches this offseason, we are going to be traveling out to 15 different locations across the country for 2-day-long QB and wide receiver training camps. Our San Francisco camp, which is first up, is completely sold out, but then we will be coming out to Orlando, Florida, New Orleans, Charlotte, Dallas, the DMV, St. Louis, Honolulu, Boston, Cleveland, Austin, Seattle, Newark, Denver, and Los Angeles, California. So if you guys want some more information on that, would like to get some work in with us for 2 whole days, check out that very first link in the description below, you guys. Let's get started with this video. So now, first things first here, this release we're going to be going over is called a hesitation skip crossover release. So hesitation skip crossover release. So I'm going to play this full speed. So this wide receiver does a great job of attacking the DB's leverage, threatening his leverage using this type of release. So the reason why we call it a hesitation skip is because of this first step that he takes with his front foot. So the mechanics of this, I'm going to break down the mechanics of the release, and then we're going to talk about when you come up to the line, when you should use it. So the mechanics are that you want to try to push off of your back foot to start the release. So you want to push off of your back foot in your stance. So if your left foot is up, you want to use your right foot to kind of push and to springboard you into this DB's leverage. So you want to push off of the back foot and then reach with the front foot. You want to reach towards the DB. And there is a change in tempo when you do this. So you push off the back foot, you are reaching with the front foot, and that is getting you to square up this DB, to close that cushion with the DB, which can then get you into that crossover release. Now, a lot of guys, when they do this hesitation skip release, it feels very rushed. They'll push off of this back foot, they'll reach with that front foot, and then they feel very rushed going into this crossover. Slow some things down, slow everything down, and then worry about taking something I call gather steps in between the hesitation and the crossover. So you see when this wide receiver, he pushes off the back foot, reaches with the front foot, but you see these steps in between that he takes, those 2 steps. I call those gather steps. Those gather your feet underneath your shoulders and put you in a balanced position to where you can throw an actual explosive crossover move. What a lot of guys will do is they'll do this hesitation skip. They'll push off this back foot, reach out with the front foot, but then what happens is their base is way too wide. And when your base is super wide, you have no explosion. So he takes those 2 gather steps to get his feet underneath his shoulders, and then what does he do? He throws a crossover move. He goes left, steps with the left foot, and then throws heavy with the right foot to the inside to attack his leverage, to threaten him inside, to get space to the outside. And notice when he throws that crossover move, look at how much his body turns. His upper half is loose. A DB in man coverage is supposed to be watching our hips, so I have to make sure that I sell that last step of the crossover with my hips and with my shoulders. So to recap, fellas, make sure on the technique of this, we are pushing off the back foot, reaching with the front foot, taking gather steps, then right into the crossover. Push, reach, gather, cross. Now, when would you use a release like this? So you would use this release if you have a DB who's lined up inside shade and we got some cushion to close. So maybe you're a slot wide receiver and you're lined up off the ball, and that DB is like maybe a yard in press, like inside shade. You have about maybe 2 yards, 1.5 yards. You would want to use this to attack his leverage. Because like, let's say, for example, this wide receiver is running a fade. He comes off the ball and he is trying to threaten this DB to the inside because that is the only way that he will move, even when he has an outside breaking route. What a lot of guys will do is they'll come back in this situation here and they'll just take off and go run to the outside. We have to close the space of the DB. Let's get into his cushion and threaten him to where he doesn't want me to go. That DB's lined up inside shade, which makes him inside leverage. And when he's inside leverage, he does not want to give up an inside release. That's when you would use this. You want to use this to threaten his leverage when he has got about 1 yard of space off you. A yard to 2 yards of space, and you have some cushion to close. Don't just give a move off the line, jab inside, then go. There is too big of a gap. Let's make sure we close that gap. Let's play this again full speed. Great job of this wide receiver attacking that DB, squaring him up, getting skinny as well to give the QB space to fade him on that route. Okay, so now, next release we're going to be talking about here, the name of it is called a foot fire release. So a foot fire release is great because it could go either way. You could do a foot fire release and take an outside release. You could do a foot fire release and take an inside release. It all kind of depends on the DB's leverage and how he is, but the beginning part of this release is called a foot fire release. So let's play this full speed. This is Elijah Moore in college at Ole Miss. He comes off foot fire, jab to the outside, and takes the inside release to run this slant. So let's talk about it, right? So this would be, like we said, foot fire release. It's obviously when you pretend like your feet are on fire. That's why they call it a foot fire release. It's pretty much essentially where you try to move your feet and your hands as fast as you possibly can, closing the distance with the DB. It's to kind of change up tempo on him, right? So like in the last example, what was that called? That was a hesitation skip crossover release. So if I have a DB who's lined up inside shade, I do that hesitation skip. I kind of slow my tempo down, and then I go into the crossover. So this, as soon as that DB maybe starts to get my tempo, I start to slow things down on him, I could speed it up. I have this foot fire. I attack him. I close the distance with this DB, and then I could throw a jab outside, or I could throw a jab back inside. Either way, it works, but you have to make sure that I have a burst of energy and I'm moving my hands and my feet fast, like they are on fire. So now, when would you use this type of release? Honestly, like I said, it could go either way. So you could do this for an outside release or an inside release. It all depends on the DB's leverage. So that means that you could pretty much use it in any situation where you have some cushion with the DB. So it's the exact same situation as the last example, except the last example was only against inside shade. You see how this DB, you could tell by where his outside foot is, he's shaded a little bit to the outside. So what I would do is I want to close the cushion with him. I never want to have too big of a gap between me and the DB. I close the cushion with that foot fire, try to force a reaction. Foot fire, jab to the outside. Threaten his leverage where he doesn't want us to go because he's outside shade, doesn't want us to go outside, and that can get us some space back to the inside. Same thing if he was lined up inside shade. If you rewind this back and let's say the DB's lined up inside shade, you could foot fire at him, give him a jab inside, take the outside release. But again, we want to use the foot fire when there's cushion, about a yard to 2 yards of space. And again, it's like my feet are on fire and I'm throwing a jab either way. Let's play this thing again, full speed one more time. Great job by Elijah Moore working that foot fire release and getting separation. Okay, so now the next release that I want to discuss here, fellas, is called a wide step dive release. So a wide step release and a dive release are two separate releases, but you want to combine them together when you face this type of look. So it's going to be very important that we pay attention to when we want to use this type of release. So let's play this full speed. This is KJ Hamler here. He does a wide step, dive release inside, gets that DB to commit to the drag, and then obviously the quarterback overthrows him a little bit, but let's go talk about this release. So we got to line up. A wide step release is something that you would use to take an inside release, right? So like a wide step is when you step, like let's say the ball's over here to the inside, your right foot's up, you would step wide with your left foot, trying to get the DB to widen out, right? And then take the inside release. So you would do this if you had to run, like a post, maybe a dig. You would do this wide step, try to get him to move, take the inside release, right? But now, since we're trying to build off of that, we're trying to make myself unpredictable, trying to make all my releases look the same to get in this guy's head. We do this wide step and then something called a dive release. So a dive release is where you pretty much just dive to the inside. At a 45-degree angle, you were trying to make this DB think that you were running a drag. So that's what Hamler does. He does the wide step, but now he bursts off of it to the inside. 1, 2, 3. And he takes 3 hard steps on a 45-degree angle to get this DB to crash. I think he could have gained a little bit more ground because you see how he starts like kind of at the bottom of the numbers and he only ends up at maybe the top of the or like middle of the numbers. I think when you do this, you need to take longer strides to really get that guy to commit. But at the end of the day, it's about pairing your releases together. If he can make that wide step dive release look like something else that he's done in the past, maybe it's a drag, maybe it's an inside release like an over route, that is what will get you separation. So a wide step dive release. Now, why wouldn't he just do a dive release to the inside right now? And that's because the DB is outside leverage. So this is kind of the situation of when to use it. If this DB were head up coverage, like right in front of Hamler, he probably could just do the dive release, attack his inside hip, inside shoulder, and get him to flip. But because he's outside shade, we want to do something to attack him and close the cushion a little bit. So he does a wide step. That attacks him. That threatens his leverage a little bit. We take the inside, and again, like we said, maybe this DB has seen it before. Maybe we've done that same type of wide step and ran a drag, and then when I can sell this thing, that really gets him to commit hard. So make sure, fellas, wide step dive release is something that we will use when the DB is outside shade. I personally would like him to maybe close a little more distance with the wide step and take longer strides on the dive to really get that DB to commit. But wide step, dive release. Let's play this again, full speed. Great job by Hamler being quick, being sudden, and then getting separation. I only like that dive release, obviously, fellas, on an outside breaking route. Okay, so now, next example I want to talk about here is called a crossover diamond release. So a crossover diamond release, it's I'm sure some of you, I'm pretty sure all of you know about a diamond release, but everybody's biggest fear on a diamond release is that when they go to the outside and they cut back underneath, the DB will be sitting right there and you'll run into him. This is how you guys can avoid that. We're going to go over 3 separate press releases right now that you guys can learn. So really, honestly, like this video is giving you 6, 7 different releases rather than just 5. So let's play this full speed. So Diggs does this crossover inside, diamond release outside, gets the DB to flip his hips to the fade, and then wins on the slant. So why do we do this? So we have inside leverage coverage. Obviously, this is like that cushion situation that I talked about earlier with that hesitation skip release, that hesitation skip crossover. So we got this cushion, and we have to run a slant. Obviously, Diggs doesn't want to just go up and run the slant because he's going to be running right into him. He doesn't want to try to attack his leverage with the hesitation skip because when he tries to run to the inside, DB's just going to keep his leverage. The whole reason we attack a DB's leverage is to get him to keep his leverage so I can open up to the outside. So if I'm running a slant, we would want to attack his outside shoulder. I would want to go right at his outside shoulder. So he does something called a diamond release. So a diamond release is the second part of this. It's where he takes 3 steps on a 45. So you see how he goes 1, 2, 3. And he's attacking the outside shoulder, outside hip. He's running with some speed, running full stride. His hips, his body language looks like it's a fade. That's what gets the DB to commit. Now, some of you might be thinking, okay, well, why do I need to add the crossover? If he's inside shade, why wouldn't I just do a diamond release outside right now? Because if you do that diamond release outside right now, this DB is going to, maybe he'll open up, but you still have to run the slant. And if there's a big gap between the two of you, he could easily recover. So we want to use something called this crossover. So he goes up to the line, and a crossover release is one more step off of that wide step release that we just talked about. So in this case, what step is a wide step? It's this outside foot, right? He would step wide. So it's one more step. He would step wide inside, and obviously not as wide with the first step. So he goes here, 1, 2. But that crossover that he does, that 1, 2, closes the cushion. So now when we go up to the diamond release, there isn't as big of a gap. We could actually attack that outside shoulder and hip without, because if Diggs would have just ran it off the line, he would be over here and there'd be a ton of space. But because we closed the distance, that got him to flip his hips and I could easily slip under. That threatens him with the fade, fellas. So let's play this full speed. So now, like I said, everybody's biggest fear at the diamond release is that this DB won't open his hips and he just sits. And I'm going to show an example of that right now. So now this wide receiver next up kind of does like a little hesitation into a diamond release. It's more like a 5-yard out, but the DB doesn't bite, right? He does everything he needs to. He hesitates. He commits his hips and shoulders to the fade. He's running on a 45. I honestly think he needs to run harder, but you see what happens. He breaks and this DB is right there. This is everybody's biggest fear. This is why a lot of people don't even try the diamond release because they're so afraid this is going to happen. Number one, when we do this diamond release, you got to go fast. Look at the difference between his diamond and Diggs' diamond. He's pretty much like jogging. Like he's like not even running the route full speed. And Diggs, when he did it, he was explosive. He was actually making it look like a fade because if we can attack at the right angle, right, fellas? If we can attack at the right angle and your hips and shoulders commit, you're running hard, this DB has to commit or else he's going to get beat on the fade. Now, there are times where the DB just will not move. And I get this question a lot. Like guys will DM me. They'll be like, hey, coach, what if he doesn't move? What if he doesn't move? What can I do? And that is when you have a fade called, you make it look the exact same with something called a hesitation slide and go release. So that's what I want to talk about here. So let's play this full speed because you see how he starts off the release. He hesitates, then he goes into the diamond, trying to go 0, 100, get that DB to flip his hips. So now after that happens, what we can do as a wide receiver is set him up. If he wants to play that game where he could just sit to the inside, not budge, I could easily go run a fade on him, and that eventually will make him move. But you have to pair the two together. So let's watch what he does right here. So he comes off the ball, hesitates, and then he just takes off. If he wants to play that game where we could just sit, where he just sits to the inside, that's easy money for me all day because I can make it look the same. DB thinks he's got my number on this. He thinks that, oh, I got him. Anytime he hesitates to the outside, he's going to be trying to run a slant. DBs are taught that. When they see that like slide to the outside, I've heard DB coaches say this too. And this is great because it's great for us as wide receivers. You hear him say, oh, well, if he slides to the outside, you know he's coming back in. So just sit right there. But that's where the great ones get space because they make it look similar. They get in this guy's head. They keep him on his toes. So you see how he comes off the ball. He does the same type of kick step. He does the same type of first tempo of everything. He hesitates. and then just takes off. DB wants to sit to the inside like this and try to be patient. I got him on the fade. We're going to at least have him by a step. And when I got him by a step and I got a quarterback who could put that ball on a dime, that's easy work for me. So hesitation, slide, and go. It's got to be the same tempo of a skip. We are using that when this DB is inside shade and we have maybe already gotten him on a diamond release and he's trying to sit, or maybe we've used that slide diamond and he sat. Everybody's biggest nightmare, but we can still get separation on a fade. And when you do this fade maybe once or twice, that will eventually start to get him to go, fellas. Even when you aren't getting the ball. Let's say your job is just to run him off. It's a run play. It's like toss left and you're on the backside on the right and your job is to get the DB out of the play. Work this stuff. It all builds. You have to be a technician with your routes. It's not complicated stuff. It's about knowing when to use it and having the right technique. Let's play this again, full speed. Great job at this wide receiver being patient, being able to get him on a step and making his releases look the same. All right, fellas, I really want to thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. If you guys have any questions at all, don't hesitate to leave those in the comment section below. We always appreciate the feedback. Always great to hear from you guys. And again, fellas, if you would like to train with us in 15 different states this offseason, we will be traveling out to these below. Check out that very first link in the description. We'd love to have you out there. I'll see you guys next time.